because every single person that disappears is obviously the Phantom, obviously scary, so therefore Batman is the Phantom.
Batman.
And plus the Phantom creates layers, so therefore Batman is the Phantom, because he is a villain, therefore by creating layers, and he's also disappearing.
He also has a face he hides from the world.
Ooh.
So he's like, I'm the Phantom. I'm gonna go beat up the Joker.
I'm vengeance.
Cinematic fantastic.
Atu, Barada, Nikto.
I'll show you who I am and what I am.
By a werewolf and lives, becomes a werewolf himself.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to the Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Weatherford.
And your other host, William Weatherford.
Get ready for opinions, dad jokes,
and bad jokes
as we watch and review sci-fi and fantasy films from the classics of yesteryear to the new favorites of today.
Hello, and welcome to the 6th episode of our podcast, where we talk about the Phantom of the Opera, the first, well, not the first, but the first Universal monster movie, as we're transitioning away from the silent era. This is our last silent era film, and we're going into the Universal monster film era, which is, those are all really great movies, and our first talkies. But this one isn't, unfortunately.
Yes, one thing to note, William, is that they didn't really have a Universal monster movie, universe as they thought of it. But that did come later as they started kind of, going, oh, we do have a thing here. And they kind of adopted the Phantom in to being part of that, because they didn't know what they were creating at the time they were creating it.
Yeah, so for this episode, we have decided that we're going to have a guest for today.
Yay!
Leya Weatherford, my older sister. Introduce yourself.
Hello.
Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
That's a hard question to answer, but I guess the most relevant things are probably the fact that I, not published, I am a writer and working on several novels and lots of poetry.
She's a very literary person, though hopefully not a figurative person.
No, she's the realest person you're ever going to meet. She's like the female version of Nick Fury.
Whatever.
I don't know about being very real. I may just be a figment of all your imagination. Who knows?
This could be an audio hallucination right now.
I am the Phantom of the podcast.
Nice.
Indeed.
Nice.
So this movie is about a woman who's named Christine and the Phantom who haunts the French opera house and who murders all the people, basically.
He doesn't murder everyone.
And so then meets and falls in love with Christine. He then meets and falls in love with Christine.
Right, try again. That was good. Well, I think he loves her before he meets her, but does he really know what love is? And that's a deep conversation.
And so therefore she gets into the opera house and she sings in the opera house
As their new prima donna.
But then he gets shunned as a romantic partner, and so then plans to kill all of her boyfriends before getting thrown in a moat. That is the basic plot synopsis.
Wow. Well,
this is based off of Gaston Leroux's 1910 Le Fantôme de l'Opéra. I'm just flubbing it.
That's okay. I will help with it.
But this is so this is a romance novel, which has a lot of romance tropes. However, this is a Universal monster movie, so what's interesting is that instead of a romance, they portray this more as a monster movie, and the Phantom more as instead of someone to be pitied, is more as a monster, is more as a villain, and that's very interesting. And the only reason we're covering it is because it's a monster movie, and a Universal monster movie at that.
Okay, so hey, William, one thing that I would like to say is that most of the reason why we see the Phantom as to be more pitied and as a tragic romantic character is probably because of the later portrayals.
The musical.
Thank you. The 1943, there's a 1961, and then, of course, most infamously, there's a musical created by Andrew Lloyd Webber that came out, I believe, in the 80s.
And that one's it's just full-on romance. They absolutely love each other all the way, and, enough to sing a really high note. Leia could probably sing it because she's the first soprano, but it would burst all our eardrums.
It would. It would blow the podcast recording software into oblivion, and we kind of have to have those for the rest of these episodes.
Yeah.
Basically, just imagine a mouse. That's
a mouse. Oh, the meme. Okay.
Oh,
I can't sing it that well. You're just gonna hear squeaking.
I thought those were shrews. Weren't they shrews in the meme? Or
maybe your guinea pigs.
Right.
Speaking of which, our personal mascots for this episode is the guinea pigs that are in Leia's room. So if you hear any of those scuttling about and going about their business, squeaking, maybe if they expect food, our apologies for that, but that is uncontrollable. Because we can't just control every little beast that we see. We can't just, extend our brain over a whole population. So, this movie was created by Universal Studios, who has grown into, this huge thing, owns a bunch of things, has a park, owns quite a bit of properties, and is pretty cool, but for now was very small. It was founded in 1919 by Carl Laemmle.
Actually, I'm going to help you pronounce it. It's Laemmle.
So Carl Laemmle.
Yes. Now, one thing I could say about Carl Laemmle is he was infamous for hiring a lot of family friends and family members. There used to be a joke that said that if you worked with him, you were probably a family friend or a family member. What's that called? Nepotism, I think, is where you just hire your family or something like that. So
basically,
us. Wait a minute. Oh, I feel so called out. Okay, so, but I didn't hire you. I asked you to do this, and you said yes. That's different.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, you could pay me if you want.
If we made money, we could. So let me sum up a little bit about Universal first off. Okay, so the most important thing that we can learn about Universal is at this time they had different what are called tiers or levels of movies. They kind of like you want to think about gold, bronze, and gold, silver, and bronze. What level of things they had something. I think it was called the Jewel level, which was like their big pictures, the ones where they put lots of money into it. They had lavish
and stars and stuff,
lavish sets, right? Lavish
and Demi Lovato and all sorts of stuff.
She's not a big star, and not in this case. All right, well, not that level. What we're talking about is so if you're trying to get the big stars, and spend the big money, you do the Jewel level. That's kind of they have something similar now because they'll do some movies that they'll do direct. They did direct to video or direct to streaming, and then they'll do that's fine. Universal can do that, but they'll also do big blockbuster stuff. So they do some. They just don't call it they don't call it Jewel and whatever the other names were. They were doing that to basically have B pictures and C pictures. Kind of
as we discussed earlier.
Yes.
In our last podcast about Lost World, it was very interesting.
Right. So by the 1920s, they were pretty established and prominent, but they weren't considered that earlier. They were mostly doing cheap, and most of the time they do cheap westerns and serials and stuff like that. So I think what really turned it around for them was those kind of Universal monster movies, but they didn't really think of the Phantom as a monster. Maybe monstrous in action, in the things that he did, but not by his appearance. And we'll talk about, when we get to talk about Lon Chaney and his theory about his characters that he played, there's a certain thing that he didn't see characters as monstrous. He looked at them as that there was something deeper within them, and that maybe
sometimes society is the monster.
True.
Yeah.
We are the monster. Well, in this case, and I have to find the quote that talks about that. So Carl Laemmle was he self-funded a lot of the movies, which is why they weren't as impressive in many things. But the one main guy that really got it going was a young studio chief named Irving Thalberg, and he was able to get Lon Chaney pulled in for Victor Hugo's The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and that one was very popular. And you get to see Lon Chaney really, stretch his makeup chops and his acting
but while
chops.
influential, we're unfortunately not covering it today because we missed the boat by 2 years, unfortunately.
Right, and
if we ever were.
And we're not covering it mainly because it's not related to the Universal Monster movie thing, but it is considered part of those, kind of adjacent to that. But the thing about it is, while Hunchback was in production, Laemmle traveled to Paris and he met Gaston Leroux. And Gaston Leroux was a one-time law student and journalist.
And then Laemmle was like, hey, he was like by this the opera house in France, and he was like, this thing's pretty cool. And then Gaston Leroux was like, well, I made a book about it. It's called The Phantom of the Opera. And he gave him his personal copy, and they read it, and then he went over and he's like, hey, can I make a movie out of this? Sure. And then it started into production.
That's honestly the highest honor as a writer, to have your friend make art or memes or even a movie if they're skilled enough.
And I'll tell you two things about how he honored that. Well, first off, the book did not start out as an actual novel. It was serialized. So what you would have to do, what do we watch today that's serialized? It's like a season of a Disney Plus show or something.
It's a breakfast.
No, boo.
Cheerios.
I meant like okay, so we come back every week to watch another episode of a show that's being shown. It's a long form entertainment. In this case, he would write a chapter and he would put it in like the local newspaper. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle did the same thing with Sherlock Holmes. What they did is they put it out there and people were like, oh, I can't get enough. And they'd buy the next newspaper. It was a real seller. And then what he did is then compiled them all together and made the book.
Kind of like Garfield, or what was the one with Calvin and Hobbes?
Calvin and Hobbes. Well, that's serialized comic strip. So in this case, it was more of a story. It was actually prose that you would read in the newspaper.
So the filmmakers, since they were unfamiliar with the Paris Opera House, so they consulted an art director who had worked at the opera, and he made charcoal sketches. Like, he literally went with a piece of charcoal and he drew on some paper.
Yeah.
And he made sketches of all the rooms and stuff, which they tried to replicate. Although it was more based on imagination than reality, his pictures.
The sets were honestly gorgeous.
Yes, they were. And
The Phantom of the Opera, therefore, is based off of imagination, the Paris Opera House.
Also, one thing about the sets that I will say is that they were some of the most extensive and expensive to do, but it paid off because the only bad thing about the sets is I think it took until they didn't use them for a good while. Many of the other sets they built on top of them, so they were still there, although they did get removed and somewhat demolished to, and I feel sad saying this, there was a Universal Studios Transformers ride, and they put that all in there instead of that.
Oh no.
That's the rumor. But I think that there is still some elements of that they moved out of there. I think the only part that really survives is the Paris Opera House part.
And what exists in our hearts, of course.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for bringing it to an emotional crescendo.
But I mean, there are 7 levels of sets in there, so it was very extensive.
Absolutely.
Sets is the Phantom's lair, which, because he's a monster, a villain, he has his own lair and stuff with his own traps and stuff and alarms, as we'll see.
I guess that would make Batman a villain and also Superman, because they both have their own lair. So a lair does not a villain make, though, William. So,
Because ogres have layers, after all.
Oh, like onions.
Yeah.
Get out of my swamp.
We're coming back to the Shrek thing again. He pulled a Shrek quote when we were talking about Max Shrek in Nosferatu, and then now it comes back full circle. Thank you, William.
It's the nature of Shrek. He has to hunt everything.
Yes. Oh,
yeah, he will never escape our minds.
He won't stop coming, and he keeps on coming.
Oh, no. Okay, so back to this. Okay, so when Laemmle was choosing a director, he chose a guy named Rupert Julian. And Rupert Julian had done big, real high-minded pictures that, like there was a guy named Eric Stroheim. He did a movie for him called Merry-Go-Round, and that's actually where Mary Philbin, who plays Christine, was in that. So, and so they knew...
That's how I knew her, probably.
Well, she also was a family friend. Again, Limley with the family friend thing. So what had happened was Rupert Julian was not the easiest guy to work for. Lon Chaney, when we get to talking about him more, but Lon Chaney actually self-directed some of his scenes. He could not talk to Rupert Julian, the director, and that's a very important thing for an actor to do, is have good communication with the director. They could not talk at all. They were like, they were not on speaking terms. So they had a cameraman, which we would call today a cinematographer. His name was Charles Van Enger, yeah. And he was the go-between in between them. And he's like, do I have to really be doing this, guys? That's what he's going. So he talks to Lon, and Lon goes, I'm doing the scene how I want to do it. You can just, it's almost like when you have somebody in the middle of a two divorced couple. And he goes, well, you tell your father that I'm not talking to him anymore. Well, you tell your mother that she's being a real jerk. It's that kind of thing.
I'm not an owl.
I'm serious. Leia, that's exactly what was happening. And, he was not the only one that got mad at Rupert Julian. The actor Norman Carey, who played Raoul, the quote love interest guy, and whatever he is, he actually ran the director down with a horse. I guess he was like, coming through here, and he about ran him over on purpose.
So while they were making the movie, inspired by the novel, they were going to add a big flashback to Persia, where Eric, he served as a conjurer and an executioner in the court of the Sultana, using his famous lasso to strangle all of the prisoners. But then when he fell out of her favor, he was condemned to a pit of carnivorous ants and was rescued by Ledo, who is now the detective in this film, in the final version. But the ants consumed his face, and that's how he had his backstory for doing that. However, of course, the part of the face thing, while it isn't like the musical and stuff,
where that is a born deformity.
Yeah. And then it eventually got toned down to just he studied in Persia with Ledo, and then eventually entirely got cut out in favor of he was on an island and he was doing the demonic black arts and stuff.
Which apparently is not book
Devil
accurate.
Island or something.
Right, Leia's right.
Lots of changes.
Mostly the movie is, it is on par with the
faithful.
book. It's pretty faithful. And what had happened was they had a version, first off, that they previewed for audiences. And it had more of a romantic comedy thing, and audiences hated that. Then, well, that's good, because that wasn't what the book was. But hang on. Hang on, there's more. So they had an ending, which was very much pretty close to the book, where Eric, the Phantom of the Opera, is he's playing music on his organ, and he dies.
It just dies.
Of a broken heart. It's very romantic, right? But the audience hated that because it was
just so sudden, and it didn't feel great.
It's not completely the suddenness.
It didn't have the action and excitement that
they saw him as having some qualities which were kind of villainous. They did see some of those, like him murdering people, and they were like, he's got to get his. And so what they did is they wanted more of an action-packed horror kind of thing. And there's a lot of people that really go into detail in reviewing this movie and say that's the part that they feel doesn't fit the movie completely.
I felt the same thing. I was kind of bored, and I wasn't paying attention at the end. So I was like, explosions, horse carriages, yes.
Right.
Yeah, there are also other endings as well. One of them was that, he was lassoing to the top of the bridge, then it was cut by Simon, and then he falls, and then he's like, his last words are, all I wanted was to have a wife like anyone else, and to take her out on Sundays. And then they're like,
no, that doesn't
That
work.
one was terrible either. And then instead, they have that he says that he's dying and that he's ill. And then, he slumps dead on the floor, and the wedding ring rolls across the carpet. And then Rel comes and consults her. But eventually, it's just that they just throw throw the Phantom into the sane sign.
Yes.
I think it very much tells how each person viewed the story when adapting it or coming up with an ending.
That's true.
Some view it as a monster movie, others a romance, and some view it a tragedy.
And then we also have the actors, of course, Lon Chaney, who was, he's the man of 1,000 faces. He did his own makeup in Hunchback of Notre Dame, and then they allowed him to do it again for the Phantom, of which he did whatever he could. Because in the book, he had no nose, apparently, but in this, his nose is just lifted up with wires and stuff, and there's, like, putty and stuff that he does to make his face incredibly hideous. It's terribly effective even to today. But it also was very torturous, and he bled a lot, and it was very uncomfortable, to put it lightly. Immense pain and torture and the suffering and the anguish and the blood, tears, and sweat.
Just your everyday.
Just your everyday.
In a movie.
Everything that you're talking about that we see in that was kept a supreme secret, even from some people on the set. They also kept it a secret in a lot of the publicity poster pictures. They would put a piece of black tape over where the face would be. They kept it very mysterious. In fact, when he would come to the set in the makeup, they'd put a hood over his face so no one could see. In fact, there was one time where there's a story, I don't know if this is absolutely true, but there's a story where, Lon Chaney had a good relationship, I guess, with the cameraman, Charles Van Enger, and he calls him into his trailer, and he scares him. And Charles says, he basically says, I about used the bathroom on myself. I went to the bathroom on myself. And he goes, why did you do that? And he goes, you told me everything I need to know with that reaction. So basically he's saying, I got the reaction that I was looking for. That'll be perfect. And when Lon Chaney is doing the infamous unmasking scene that he does in the movie, and if you see the movie, fellow listeners,
very famous.
And when he does it, the reaction from the actress Mary Philbin, who plays Christine, was actually, that was real. She really did get freaked out by that. And that's honestly the most memorable thing about this entire movie, to me and to a lot of other people, is the genius of Lon Chaney. One thing to mention, though, William, and I have seen the 1957 biopic about Lon Chaney called The Man of 1,000 Faces, starring James Cagney. I've seen it like 3 times. When we used to have cable back at my mom's house, and she had an old movie channel. You guys would love it.
History Channel.
Well, sort of. It's an old movie channel. So let me sum it up real quick. A lot of the story is fictionalized, but one main thing that we do know is, and he had some other issues with thing with his wife that he had divorced, and they left him a son, of course, who later changed his name to be Lon Chaney Jr., which we will see him quite a few times in our movies. Lon Chaney Sr. was actually, his parents were deaf and mute, so they lived in a world of silence. And so all his expressions and everything that you see, when you see him in movies that are silent, it's going to give you a whole new appreciation for him and his work. Because when you see it, all the expressions and things he's doing, these are things that how he would express himself to people that were in the deaf community and were absolutely silent. And the shame of it is when they went to, quote, talkies or pictures with voice in them.
Like his voice had a trouble and he couldn't survive it.
Well, the reason his voice had trouble is because he had throat cancer. It's kind of sad. It's like his first and one of his last pictures that was a talkie was called The Unholy Three. And the reason why that was his first talkie and not the Phantom. Backstory real quick. The Phantom, they did a reissue of it in 1929 where they filmed some scenes anew, and they had actual singing in it. Mary Philbin was actually she could actually sing opera, so they had her do it. And when they did, they refilmed some scenes, but they couldn't get Lon Chaney to do it because he was already contracted with MGM and was doing the Unholy Three as his first speaking sound role. And so you can't say, oh, this is Lon Chaney's first speaking role, and yet do it in, the reissue of Phantom. It just wouldn't work. Plus, when you're contracted to a studio, sometimes you sign a signature saying, I'll just do MGM stuff from now on or for this period of my life. You remember we talked about that before. People were contracted to certain movie production groups, and they would only do Universal Pictures, or they would only do whatever. And I think that has gone away in the modern era pretty much, unless you've contracted with, like let's say Chris Evans, who plays Captain America. He's contracted for a certain number of pictures but that's different. That's different than being a Universal person or a MGM person. You could do a variety of different pictures for them.
You're not signed up to one specific person.
Or you're not signed up to one specific genre or whatever. But some people just had a lot more success in the genres that they did. A lot of Lon Chaney's stuff that he was really good at was the silent stuff. It's a shame that when they went over to talkies that it didn't work out so well for him. But we still have these pictures and these movies, these films that we can look at and enjoy. And to me, Phantom, although it's an interesting story, it's rather straightforward. It's a simple story. That's okay.
It's not very deep, but that's okay. So, Leia, what's your thoughts?
Well, I personally think at least the concept is very deep, depending on how you look at it. Although the musical is kind of responsible for showing the character of Christine being more pitying towards the Phantom.
I agree.
And that was not a detail that was in this movie. I think it still really shows society, even if it was a monster movie. There are a lot of people who are belittled and pushed down and made to feel weird or even like a monster.
Yeah.
And you have the phrase, the people who hurt other people. And while that isn't an excuse to hurt people, it does explain why a lot of people who have been abused or bullied or hurt go on to do the same. And with the Phantom, he has experienced maybe all his life, I don't know, depending on what you view his backstory as. He has experienced people looking at him in horror and always viewing him as a monster. And while he did become a horrible person and a monster, that was hugely due to society's treatment of him.
Yes.
And so if you really think about it, there is a lot of things we can do as a society to improve. Even still, we aren't quite as terrible to people who have differences or disabilities or
Indeed.
Deformities, but there are still horrible people, especially online.
Yes.
And I think it is very important that we truly look at the villains in the story, not excusing them, but with a pitying look, and try and understand what has pushed them to do so that we don't push others to do the same.
One thing to answer that is that goes perfectly with a quote that Lon Chaney once said. He said, "I wanted to remind people that the lowest types of humanity may have within them the capacity for supreme self-sacrifice. The dwarven or the misshapen beggar of the streets may have the noblest ideals." So he wanted people to even look past the makeup that was horrifying sometimes and maybe look past it and go, well, there's a depth there. There's someone there and there's something going on. It's especially true of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and that's especially true
Yes.
of Eric the Phantom. Now, as we're kind of summing up here, William, is there anything more that you want to say before we go on to the plot of this picture?
We have time for 3 other people who are very important. So we have Mary Philbin, of course, who played Christian Day, and also who was another character who was also named Day. She really liked playing people named Day, I guess. In The Man Who Laughs, who is the predecessor movie for Joker.
Oh, it was Dia. So anything with a D and an A in it, I guess she loves it. But yeah, she played a character named Dia, and Dia was blind, and The Man Who Laughs was named Gwynplaine, and she loved.
He was played by Conrad Veidt, who, as we know, is Césaire.
Oh, one thing about Mary Philbin is I did think about that her acting in this was a little over the top, but
Very memeable, though.
yeah, very memeable. But here's the thing though about Mary Philbin is, unfortunately, I hate to kind of say this, but she didn't have the easiest time working with Norman Carey, who played Raoul. Norman Carey was famously a little handsy. So if you think about it, that she kind of had to deal with, he was a little bit inappropriate. And
he was also a swashbuckler kind of character who he also played in the things that he played. He was also formerly Norman Kaiser before World War I. Of course, you wouldn't ever be named German during a German war because because otherwise you'd be targeted. So it's like, hey, what's your name? Kaiser. That's obviously German.
You'd say my name's James Hitler. How you doing? No, I think we need to change your name, sir, to Hiller, to make your acting work. Yeah, Norman Carey. He was very kind of a leading man character. Raoul wasn't the most leading man kind of character, but Norman Carey played leading men characters a lot. With you have a leading man, they're going to be put together with a romantic lead as well, and so it's a shame that he had that habit of being. And again, we're just going off of some things Mary Philbin said. If she says that he was that way, and then we'll have to go. Let's go with that, because maybe there's some other ladies that were in not so famous pictures with him that had similar things to say, but didn't have the guts to say it.
Indeed. And the last person is Arthur Edmund Corot. Or as he uses in movies, just Arthur Corot without Edmund.
Was he Ledoux, the Persian guy?
Yeah, he was Ledoux. Interesting fact about him: he was in Fan of the Opera. He was also in Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1927. But he was considered for, which is going to be our next episode, is 1931's Dracula. He was considered for the role of Dracula before Bela Lugosi was chosen to be Dracula. Honestly, from his performance in this movie, I would have really liked him to be Dracula because he would be so perfect for...
Once you see Bela Lugosi as Dracula, you're probably never going to see anyone else as Dracula again. I think he's that iconic.
Final thoughts is that this was the beginning of Universal Studios as a whole with their first couple of movies. And Leia, your final thoughts?
I don't think I have any.
I think what we should do is let the giant chandelier of the break crash into us and put us... let us get smashed beneath the heavy weight of the wonderful break. And then when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about the plot. And oh boy, is there a plot. There definitely is. And it's fascinating.
So, shall we bid adieu?
Oh, adieu. Oh, that we're using French now.
Adieu.
Adieu, good sir.
Boy.
Boy, goodbye.
And we're back. We're glad that you're still with us as we are going through
1925's Phantom of the Opera.
The Phantom of the Opera.
So we went to go watch this movie in the opera, and then we came back, and now we have stuff to say about it.
Oh, after intermission. We just had intermission where everybody goes out to the lobby and gets themselves a snack, just like the old cartoon says.
So Leia's going to handle the plot today, which is very cool.
We are going to go over the plot, and our guest, Leia, my daughter, Leia Weatherford, is going to go over the plot, and we'll kind of discuss, kind of as she's going, what's going on. If we need to interrupt for any reason, that's fine. Go ahead, but don't stop or flow too much. I'm sure it'll work just fine. I think it'll be fine.
Okay. Here's the plot as told by me, a writer. So you are sure to have lots of long vocabulary. Very smart. Mm-hmm. So basically, we start off with this guy with a lantern. He comes in. So he's looking around, kind of going, what? What's going on here? And
yeah, the lantern guy is pretty awesome. He's just like there, and he's mysterious. No one knows his purpose until he just comes rumbling around, and he's like, hey, I'm the lantern dude, I'm out. And he's literally just has no purpose.
Now, William, there's different theories about the lantern guy because it appears that it comes from the 1929 talkie version, except there's a lantern guy in the other version, too. So
silent movies are always mysterious, I guess.
that's true.
Honestly, it being a silent film messes with me because I have to be constantly doing other things while I'm watching a movie. So I'm over here like, oh yes. In the moment it took for him to look around, I have already like built a castle, cleaned my room, stop the government from, I don't know, whatever governments are doing these days, these dystopian days.
Leia's not a fan of silent movies, I guess.
Exactly, these dystopian days. All right, so what's next?
What's next is that I wanted to talk a bit about, what kind of conflicts there are, because as Leia is a writing person, conflict is the very cornerstone of writing. So we have, lots of man versus man, or woman. We have man versus society.
True.
Because Eric is shunned by society. And kind of a bit of man versus self or fate.
Yeah.
Because of his deformities.
That's possible.
I'll save more of that for later, I think.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to hear what you've got to say on that.
So, Leia, what's going on with that shadowy figure?
Yeah, there's a shadowy figure. He comes out, he has a hat. That's the one thing that I noticed about the Shadow Man. He has a hat. That doesn't mean anything, but for all you guys who need a visual thing, he's got a hat. So,
Isn't he the Phantom?
yeah, but he wears a hat.
Yeah, I think I've seen him wear a hat at least when he was in the as the Mask of the Red Death. When he has that skull mask on.
So the Shadow Man.
Got friends on the other side. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So then we're brought to the opera where we are shown about the whole performance of these girls doing ballet. It is very lovely to watch.
If we just knew what they were performing, then we could play it for you here, I guess.
It would be interesting to see what they are performing. It is very lovely. Lots of flowers. They have these flower arrangements they hold above their heads. I don't know what they're called. In between their dancing, we are shown these men in spectacles, and they all look very businessy. Just imagine the Monopoly Man. Although apparently he doesn't have a spectacle. Gets canceled immediately.
Which is really funny. And so they're like selling the building rights to him.
Yeah.
To the other two men. The two men are selling rights to two men.
They really feel like they're just trying to get it out from under themselves.
Yes.
Because they're like, here you go. Well, you're selling it for a lot less than it's worth. Yeah, that's great. You're getting a deal. Bye. And, because they're afraid of the Phantom.
They bring up an opera ghost. And these dudes are like, okay, so, this opera ghost, that's just a myth, right? The other dudes just kind of laugh. And they react by going, oh, the man in box 5 or something won't be laughing. And they're like, wow, guys, we're not children. Stop trying to scare us away from fairy tales. But then the guys are kind of paranoid now. So the two guys who just bought it, they go out and they talk to this maid and they're kind of like, so who's the man in box 5? And the maid is like, I have literally no clue. And then she's like, oh, wait, you mean the guy with the hood, creepy guy. Oh, yeah, I still have no clue who he is. So they go in to check on the man in box 5. They go in and they get really freaked out. So they walk out. But then they look at each other like, okay, no, we're not children. And they go back in. This guy's gone. Where did he go? I have no clue. Because
every single person that disappears is obviously the Phantom, obviously scary, so therefore Batman is the Phantom.
Batman.
And plus the Phantom creates layers, so therefore Batman is the Phantom because he is a villain, therefore by creating layers, and he's also disappearing.
Hey, he also has a face he hides from the world.
Ooh.
So he's like, I'm the Phantom, I'm gonna go beat up the Joker.
I'm vengeance.
That's lovely.
All right, so what happens next, Leia?
So then we get to the part with the dancers. Although, for some reason I wrote this, that we start the scene with this old man, and a cat walks down the stairs, and he looks at the cat, shrugs. What does the cat mean? What does it mean?
But the cat is the Phantom for every single thing. Just a normal cat, totally a normal cat.
Well, it was a black cat.
Yeah, everything's the Phantom. Everyone is the Phantom. Everyone can be the Phantom. Which is a really interesting point I want to discuss later, but go on.
Yeah. So the dancers come backstage and see the shadow of the hat-wearing shadow, as I described it in my notes. They're like, oh, it's the Phantom, which is kind of sums up the first couple scenes of the movie. It's the Phantom.
Yeah.
And they're like, he didn't have a nose. They're like, girl, yes he did. He had a huge nose, so they have no clue what he looks like.
But if he did had a nose, that would be literally so obvious. How could you not describe it? How could you not distinguish it? It's probably because originally he didn't have a nose, but Lon Chaney couldn't not have a nose. He didn't have CGI to be Voldemort, so instead he just drawed it up.
Yeah.
So they can't decide if they like Lon Chaney or Eric the Phantom from the book better.
Oh,
That's an interesting point.
I thought it was one of the guys that worked there. The guy with the little head, which was kind of creepy. He was holding a puppet-looking head on his lap.
Yeah.
It was that dude. His description was very much like the book.
The way I describe this guy in my notes is brilliant. I'm going to read it for you.
Mm-hmm.
I said, then a guy comes. He is emo. He had eyeliner. Very edgy man.
You could say that about every hobo on the street.
This is the guy with the head puppet. I said it was a Jesus head puppet.
Oh, the head puppet.
Kind of looked like Jesus.
Oh.
It was really weird.
It's a bearded guy, so it's Jesus.
Every
Wow,
bearded
that's
guy is
everybody.
Jesus. Hot take.
That's amazing. Hot take. It's almost like a campfire story that he's telling these ballerinas.
So basically, he's saying he has a 7-foot frame.
Oh no!
We don't talk about...
Oh, no.
That's literally cropping up into everything since it's never escaping us.
So what's next?
Then the old man we met during when the cat walked down the stairs. That was an important moment, I guess.
Pivotal,
He's like,
I'm sure.
guys, we should not talk about ghosts. They don't like to be seen or talked about. So this edgy guy with the head puppet is immediately like, excuse you? I'm going to show you exactly where I saw him. I don't care about you and your cowardice. So he brings him up. They kind of look around, and then the shadow appears, and they all run out.
Yeah. Another similarity to Nosferatu is the shadow shots of the villain, which are used until we meet him personally, which is a similarity to Nosferatu, one of many comparisons that I'll talk about later.
Yes. The next scene, we have Carlotta's mom. She comes in to the office of the new owners and is like, look at this letter! The Phantom has threatened my daughter.
The letter says, Christine Day will sing the role of Marguerite Wednesday. Any jealous attempt on your part to interfere with the opera will prove disastrous to your career. Signed, the Phantom.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she's over here like, this will not do. You guys better fix it. And then slaps them with a fan.
Yeah, but a little bit before this, there was also a scene where they're going up and down a chute that's like a theater prop, and is like they're going up and down and up and down. That was really funny.
When they were running away from the shadow.
Yeah.
That was kind of funny.
And also, intertitles have changed. They literally change, and they have animated backgrounds, at least in the first part, and some other places. Also, they're tinted to the scene as well, which brings a ton more light into our last silent film. These are the last intertitles we'll see on our podcast, unfortunately.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm sure there'll be some now and again, because intertitles completely did not go out of favor. They're evolved a little bit and they changed slightly, but you're going to hear people speak their lines instead of reading them. But there are going to be some things like, some of the most famous intertitles will announce, where a scene is taking place, like a city, or kind of introduce the story in a couple small sentences, unless it's Star Wars and to be a couple pages worth of text.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
Intertitles do not completely go away. They just they aren't as descriptive as we see in the silent era.
Indeed.
We later see the daughter is ill, apparently, and Christine, as the understudy, takes her role. And then we meet, I'm assuming, our protagonist, or at least our second protagonist.
Raul?
Yes, we see him. Raul.
I know Raul is. Didn't he talk to Christine and she says she's been tutored by a divine voice, the spirit of music?
I don't know. I didn't see that in the movie.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
The first time that we see him is when he's in the audience watching her perform, and
with Philippe.
Yes, his brother is there. His brother, right?
They have the same last name.
Yes, his brother then is like, okay, I think your girlfriend has a crush on a homicidal ghost. That's what the rumors are. And I just call him Loverboy in my notes. He's like,
wow.
Don't worry, bro. Nothing can stop our love. That's exactly what he said.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, They're the two lovers of our movie, Christine Day and Ro.
It's such a fun name, Raoul. Then the brother is like, okay, you do you, I guess. Don't get careful. And Raoul is like, yeah, whatever. He goes on to find her after the performance in the actor's room, and he's like, I love you. Look at you finding a career and being super talented. And then, although this isn't an exact proposal, he's kind of like, well, we should get married now. And she's like, I'm an independent woman, and I've got to follow my dreams of the opera. Forget about our love. And then they kiss, as if Christine had not just said that. Then he leaves, and Christine hears an angelic voice, and that voice says, look at all I've done for you. Look at how nice I am. Now forget everything else except your career and me, of course. And, of course, Raoul is listening in, and he's like, I guess I'm crazy now.
Because there's a voice in the walls that were the previously mentioned muse. That's the fan of the opera, secretly. And he's deathly in love with you. You ever have a secret admirer who's just deathly in love with you, and you meet him, and you're like, this guy is just creepy.
Every day.
Who's inside the wall?
Yeah, he's inside the wall. We can vaguely see a shadow. He's just Shadow Man for now.
Everything I've ever loved is here within these walls. Sorry, secret sighting that I'm blocking out your calls.
Beautiful.
Oh, no.
I love that.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
So that was your Frozen 2 reference. So, after the second warning by the Phantom, what happens next?
So, yes, the mom comes in and she's like, Christine's friends are plotting again. They're threatening my daughter and telling her to pretend to be ill. But nothing, and I say nothing, will stop Carlotta from singing. So they completely ignore any of the danger that was threatened, and Carlotta sings.
In fact, she sings Faust, which is the opera that they've actually been doing this whole time, is Faust. And the prima donna...
Carlotta is singing as... She's singing as a character named Marguerite.
Yeah.
Marguerite Wednesday. And in this section, while she's singing, the Phantom is sabotaging the place, and there's a light pulsing effect, which I have not mentioned my video game nerdiness, but I feel like I really have to, if you'll let me. Minecraft will have a future update, which has a really famous mob called the Warden, which is a boss mob that goes around, and it creates this light pulsing effect around it, which is really terrifying, and kill you in like a couple of hits, just finish you off, which I cannot help but seeing the resemblance of the light pulsing effect that the Phantom causes versus the Warden.
I didn't know it did that.
Creepy.
Oh, that's fun. That's a little bit horror-y.
So what happens after the lights are flashing? I think one of the biggest scenes in the whole, one of the largest scenes in the whole film happens.
Yeah. During this performance, we are seeing Carlotta sing, and
then it says, she's singing to bring down the chandelier, and then it crashes.
Yes.
It kills like something like 50 to 100 people. I can't even tell how many people are murdered.
Yeah, why do people even remake this chandelier after the Phantom kills people? They just remake it.
They hang it right back up with not nary a thought.
But it's broken, so how? And plus, the movie treats it as an afterthought, the crash part, versus the musical treats it as like the main centerpiece is the chandelier crashing down, which
or poetic, depending
really
on how
sad.
you look at it.
It's a big stunt scene. If this was a scene with stunt people in it, it's one of those big set pieces that should shock people. But I think that the actors portraying it just kind of go, okay.
Okay, something I wanted to point out. Christine comes out during the panic while everyone is like, oh no. She comes out, just stands there, and then literally walks backward, which I think is the funniest thing. I laugh out loud every time I see it. She just walks out, is like, okay, nope. She noped out of there. So people are running, and the edgy man, the guy with the eyeliner and the Jesus head puppet, he comes out and shares kind of a sketchy glance with Raoul, and then they both leave. And of course Raoul is going over to the actor room, maybe to kind of spy on Christine, see what's going on. He's kind of suspicious of her. And she comes in, And the Phantom is like, hey! And Christine comes in. The Phantom is like, hey! And she kind of has this shocked expression for a second, and then is like, sup? I don't know how to describe it. Her face kind of goes blank.
Does she actually see him, or is he's talking to her behind the mirror?
There's a secret mirror in her bedroom
like
that just flips
It's
down.
a secret door that leads down to the lair.
All of which have green tinting, which is also really interesting, as it was used for the jungle previously in Lost World. It's used for dank areas. But it's only used for certain dank areas, like the backstage and the entrance part, but otherwise doesn't appear, which is really bad continuity. Like, might as well dye it all green when you're in the lair. Give them a symbolism to represent the family.
Yeah, it's very strange. She kind of has this look of, like, oh, kind of suspicious now. But she follows him anyway into the mirror, like you said. And Rayo is like, oh no, what's even happening? And she kind of follows him and is like, well, I'm scared now. And the Phantom is like, no, it's me. Remember? I'm your angel of music. That he didn't say that. That's musical reference. And he's also like, okay, don't mind the mask. Just remember everything I've done for you. And then I think he enchants her or something. It's a little bit confusing. Her face does go very blank, and she just follows him. Sort of a Sleeping Beauty situation.
He does kind of have a hypnotic control, because there's certain parts where they will blur the scene while she's looking at him. It's like he's causing her to fade out.
Yeah, so his mask that he uses when he appears, it's like a full face mask but only half, while the rest of it is a cloth mask, which I thought was really interesting. I wonder why. That it wouldn't be either a full face mask or, I don't know, just like the pandemic face masks. Well, it's like them both combined. He has just a random pandemic.
I think it covers up his deformed mouth, but also allows him to sing, like his breathing, so he can sing, but through that, it's still not covered up. But if you look at other masks, they cover up a good deal of the face until you get to the more modern masks, that were inspired by the musical, and it's like a half mask.
Sort of like one of those masks that are half smiling, half frowning, sort of that vibe.
Kind of, and it takes up half the face, and the reason why is because they shifted the deformity to the other side of the face, or they damaged, or however it comes from, and they did that so that the actor could emote and sing on stage and still be seen as, also he can look half handsome or kind of handsome and be mysterious.
But of course in the musical, they changed it to only like a half mask so that he's more humanized.
I agree with that.
William, you mentioned the sort of COVID mask parallel. I literally wrote in my note. Also, by the way, don't mind the mask. The CDC recommended it.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah.
So he also tells her that there's also a little suite where he stays. What a lot of people that have reviewed this said is like, they say all this stuff and then...
It's like he was preparing for them to marry. He has like monograms stuff.
I don't think he didn't go that far.
No, they were. He had stuff with her name on it.
Uh-oh. He's got a nice little bed for her to stay on, but for him, it's a coffin. Yeah, that's not emo at all.
He said it reminds him of death, the other sleep.
And also, don't forget to mention his canal that he has on his way to his lair. It's kind of like the Grand Canal in Venice.
He also has a horse
Pony
that
Express,
he chucks her on, and then a boat. Where did the horse come from?
What is the horse doing down there? He's just...
My question,
I'm just
exactly.
A sewer horse. What's up, guys? I'm a sewer horse.
Sewer horse.
A source.
Yeah. He tells her, I brought you here because I love you. Please love me. And... she is like, oh, I know what you are.
You're the Phantom.
Duh.
And she's like, you're impossibly emo and creepy. Your skin is covered in a mask. I know what you are. And he's like, say it out loud. Say it. The Phantom.
Vampire. I'm a vampire. Was that a Twilight reference?
Yes.
I know what you are. Say it. Say it out loud. Vampire.
Yeah, and he's like, I'm only the Phantom because people's hatred made me so. If you love me, I will be saved. I'm Eric, by the way. And then she passes out, as one does. I mean, understandable. And he's like, well, okay. Puts on the bed.
She wakes up and there's a note there's a note that said you can come and go as you please, but to never look behind his mask.
Yep.
And
what does she immediately do? Look behind the mask.
Yeah.
But we're getting too far ahead. The first thing that she hears when she wakes up is in the other room, the Phantom is playing the organ. We interrupt today's broadcast with a helpful life lesson: how not to terrify your love interest. Number 1, kidnap them. Number 2, play them a very not creepy song on the least creepy instrument. 3, threaten their loved ones. And that concludes our helpful life lesson on how not to terrify your love interest. So anyway, Christine comes up and is like, ooh, what you playing? And he's like, oh yes, this song reminds me of you and triumphant love. Yet listen, there are sounds and ominous undercurrent of warning. Red flag alert.
Don Juan triumphant.
Red flag alert.
Yeah, exactly.
And she decides, after all that, and the facts, that he attempted to squash people, he did squash people, with a chandelier, that it is a perfectly safe and reasonable thing to remove his mask, the one thing he said, don't do, or else. And honestly, I love this scene because it is so, especially on the Phantom's part, it is brilliant, his emotion, because he kind of walks up to her, grabs her face, and just laughs, and then immediately looks in pain.
This is the most iconic scene of the entire movie, where he just pulls
He
off.
goes
He's
up
like,
to her and is like,
and
how
it's like
could
really
you
creepy, and it hit people extremely.
look upon me and my ugliness?
This is the first time that she's seen Lon Chaney in the makeup too. So the reaction that she gives,
Completely genuine.
Lon Chaney did not want anybody to, like I said before in the podcast, Lon Chaney didn't want anybody to see the makeup at all. I mean, the cameraman, Charles Van Inger, he saw it and it freaked him out. So Lon Chaney knew he had a hit on his hands with this. And they would black out the face of the Phantom on any kind of advertising so you wouldn't know. And in fact, they would do these things during movies. They would say, whatever you see in this movie, please do not tell your friends about it and reveal the secret. I mean, that's kind of like what people do now, is where
No spoilers.
You know, where Tom Holland will say, hey, this trailer that's coming up has some spoilers if you haven't seen this such Endgame movie or whatever. So it's a very...
Or Andrew Garfield saying, I was not in this movie completely. I'm not the werewolf.
Stop.
But he's a really good liar and a really good actor.
Lactor.
So back to this, what I would say is that it's probably the most effective and scene in the whole movie. Honestly, the story is good, and I won't downplay the story at all, but his appearance in it is something that will stick with you for a long time. And there's a lot of actors that, when they were little kids, saw this movie when it came out, and they said that it affected them for years and years later. They would still see that image of the Phantom. So say what you will about the story, but Lon Chaney does stick with people.
Yeah, I'm gonna continue to comment on this scene. I need to say more.
Right on.
As I said, he literally goes up and grabs her face, which is terrifying, and laughs, but immediately just has the most pained expression. And it really truly shows so much emotion. It's shocking, and you feel bad for both Christine and the Phantom, but also just horror, because even if the Phantom is sympathetic in some ways, he's still a terrible person. And that's all in him. But it's sad because you know that a lot of what pushed him towards this was how people treated him. And he was locked up, wasn't he? In an insane asylum or something. Just always treated like a monster. Even if it is his fault for acting like that, it still hurts to see that that's what he was pushed into. I thought he gave a lovely performance right there. And honestly, beautiful work from just everyone.
He does say that she's now his prisoner. So it kind of... every time the Phantom it says something that makes you pity him, then he'll say something really creepy and violent and non-consensual. So what do you say about that?
He's a bad man. I'm not saying he's a good man or that it was all society's fault. You can have good people come out of terrible circumstances. it's just sad
True.
to see that society does that to people.
And so then next we have the ball. The mask ball. And we jump into it with
you missed something. Well, you missed.
She's
Christine. She says, "Please let me sing again on the surface world."
Yeah.
Christine is like, let me go where I want to go. I promise I'll be your slave forever. And he's like, okay, fine, just don't see that boy that you like.
Don't talk to
Raoul or else you both die.
Oh,
and
gosh, that's horrible.
It's so sad because the expression he wears looks like he almost feels like he has to punish her. He has to set all these rules, and he's like, well, it's your fault because he doesn't want to kill her. He could care less about Raoul, but it's such a twisted mindset, and it's beautiful. It's lovely piece of cinema. I sound so stuck up. Sorry.
Now that they're out of the lair, we jump into a fantasy intertitle, like a fantasy storybook intertitle, which is really interesting because usually they're just in one font, and now we have one that's in a different font. And previous to this, there was also an intertitle that had writing in it as well, of like handwriting. So I mean, like that's very interesting where all the intertitles are varied now.
Yeah, because Christine sends Raoul a letter that she needs to meet up with him.
Yeah, and I was like amazed at like this. I was like, my mind was blown whenever I saw that. Because I mean, compared to all the things that we've seen, it's definitely an upgrade in that aspect. And interesting thing about the ball is that they tinted the clothes, but like only the clothes. They like tinted every object and clothes individually, like red and black and gray is the theme of the masquerade ball.
Masquerade.
And it gives it an unnatural color, like an artificial color to it. That's kind of fantastical.
It's so up my alley. I love masquerade balls. Never been to one.
And like being able to tint a specific part of the body of clothes as they move, like accurately, extremely accurately at that, compared to like the smudginess of stuff like a Trip to the Moon color version, of course. That's like amazing, the accuracy that they could do with the tinting.
It's difficult now and tedious to do it digitally, but they did it frame by frame, and that's to be commended, definitely. Anything that they did during these traditional times.
The dedication. I could never.
Well, and the great thing is, the most over-the-top dramatic person has to show up to see Raoul and Christine have a little meeting, and this extremely dramatic person is, of course,
the Phantom.
He's dressed as the Red Death, and it's just an awesome costume.
He literally says that he's like, you guys are dancing on the graves of tortured men as the Red Death. I rebuke your merriment.
And they're like, ooh, this
Super
must be part of
annoyed.
the show. I think they were acting like kind of freaked out for a moment. Then they went, awesome. This is kind of a cool party. This guy comes out and says some creepy stuff. Isn't this, I don't know if this is true or not. The Red Death thing was from the Edgar Allan Poe story, Mask of the Red Death, I think, in where a character comes in with a red skull kind of and a red outfit get up. So I think that's what he's dressing as. But yeah, so he comes out, creeps them out, and they hoof it. What happens after that?
Christine and Raoul go up on top of the opera house,
where there's a statue that's a very famous statue scene, and the Phantom is up secretly at the top, right, as well.
Yes. He comes to overhear it with his cape flying in the wind. She's like, no one can hear what I have to say. Meanwhile, the Phantom is overhearing everything, and she says, I have seen the Phantom. He's a monster, and you must save me. And Raoul is like, after the performance, we can leave. And they hug. Very cute. And the Phantom is like, emotional damage.
Emotional damage.
He's like, she's betrayed me. So the two lovers come downstairs, and the edgy man gives them directions, says, don't go that way, this way. So they back up awkwardly. The Phantom comes downstairs, whipping his cape around in the skull mask, like, out of the way. And all the business people and all the people are like, oh, it's the Phantom. Now we switch over to a scene with the business guys who find a note on Eric, who is a self-educated musician and a master of black art. He was exiled to Devil's Island for...
Which is also not accurate to the
insane people. And he's escaped and now at large. Yes, William, this is not book accurate. An interesting detail, though.
Yeah.
So they go, there you have it. That's the Phantom. Don't know why they didn't put that together sooner. They just kind of dealt with the opera ghost.
And so they delve into the catacombs?
Not yet. We start with the opera, where Christine is crying in the actor room right before the performance starts. And the Phantom has told her that, I'm assuming he told her, that he knows the plan. And Raoul is like, yep, it's okay. You'll be okay. He dries her tears and says, we'll go after the performance. This scene was really cute. The next scene is of the old man who finds someone's been hanged. He gets a group of people and they identify the man as Joseph.
Like, strangled. I mean, they, like, totally got away with that. Where it's like, how on earth do you have someone getting hanged in something like that? That's really funny.
They showed the shadow. It was honestly terrifying. Remember in Tarzan, where they showed the shadow of the bad guy who had accidentally hanged himself? Just with the lightning strike, they showed the shadow. That's something you don't notice as a kid. You're welcome, your childhood is ruined. So, during Christine's performance, the Phantom appears taking a guy down in one of the boxes that I'm assuming is where they operate some of the special effects that go on stage. And she sees the Phantom and is kidnapped again. So, Raoul goes looking for her everywhere, and the edgy man comes up to him. He says he can bring him to Christine, and Raoul is like, okay, who are you? Apparently, edgy man is the secret police, which I think is a detail added in the movie, not something in the book.
His name is given as Inspector Ledoux.
Inspector Ledoux.
That's mainly in the intertitle that his name
because
is
actually he was, in the book, he was a Persian.
Yeah, he was known as the Persian. Yeah, and so they're kind of making it like he's an undercover guy.
They entirely retconned the Persian thing from the original idea. I discussed this earlier of the flashback to Persia, where he would, of course, be the executioner for the
Sultan. And Ledoux has been tracking Eric since he escaped as a prisoner from Devil's Island, and he knows secrets and he knows secret openings and stuff. So what happens there, Leia?
He brings Raoul down into the catacombs, showing him the mirror trick, and tells him to put his hand up, just one hand, right beside his face, so as not to get strangled. And we go back to the Phantom and Christine, and the Phantom is like, how dare you love the other guy when I did all this for you? I'm a nice guy. Trademark.
Oh, no.
Trademark nice guy syndrome. Really not nice, though. Murder guy
you probably
syndrome.
Didn't know this, though, that the Phantom has a nifty trick that he can do that he uses very shortly. Doesn't the brother of Raoul come looking for them?
Yes, and that triggers an alarm.
Yeah, the Phantom has an alarm, and it's basically like a lion or like a cat moving his claws up and down, like
sort of like that.
It's really funny. It kind of reminds me of
Was it the Lucky Cat? Is what that's called?
And it also reminds me of Nosferatu in his castle, as we discussed in Nosferatu. No, I didn't. I didn't say it was in the castle, but it was in Nosferatu's castle that he has a skeleton clock. It's like a clock with like a skeleton on it. It's pretty cool. And it's also very similar. Another similarity of Nosferatu and this movie.
Yes. And sadly, our two heroes fall into a trap, and the Phantom goes to check, see who all is out there. He drags Raoul's brother into the water, which you have to pass by boat.
He uses snorkel.
Uses a snorkel.
He uses like a snorkel. Now, I want to mention two things here. First off, he's using a snorkel I want everyone to realize this when you watch this movie. Of course, the link will be in the description, or the link will be in the blog post on this. The thing that where he's going is the sewer. Now the less we say about what a sewer is, the better. But when he goes under that water, I'm like, dude, really. What I also did not realize, because this is not a sound movie, I looked into the part where in the book, and supposedly he is not only breathing out of this snorkel, he is singing, and his singing is so hypnotic and it draws someone to listen to it. That is what causes somebody to...
Confirmed, the Phantom is a mermaid.
To get pulled in.
It's confirmed.
The control of his body to not breathe out of the hole in his face, and he's underwater. That can't be sanitary or good for your breathing. And he's singing, and he's breathing through a snorkel. So good on you, buddy. I could not do that at all. I can't do it.
I think it's time we get some advanced singing training. This is not what they're teaching in high school band.
No, it's not.
High school band and choir.
No, they certainly aren't.
Yes.
So Philippe is drowned, and Eric goes back in and sees the two guys in.
Yeah, the torture chamber is really interesting, where there's mirrors all around. And it's creating heat so that they would burn to death. I mean, mirror heat would not be on my grave. I mean, like, that's one of the most oddest death. I mean, good on you, Phantom. I mean, like, that would be the oddest death to ever give someone. R.I.P. Mr. Baker died by mirror heat.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So what happens after that, Leia?
While the Phantom was out snorkeling, Christine has been looking for the keys to try and free Raoul and Edgy Man, the secret police guy. And the Phantom catches her and hears the voices and realizes the two guys are in the mirror room. And he goes to turn on the heat and is like, okay, bargain for their lives. What are you going to offer me? The Phantom still has explosives.
Yeah.
Of course he does.
Barrels full of gunpowder in a little chamber
And
down
so
below.
then Christine is begging the Phantom, and he's like, please, I'll do anything, just save Raoul. Because he's like, when he didn't die first off, he's then flooding it, so they also die. And then he also has explosives, so he's such a villain. He has so many traps on top of his traps. He's got, like, spare traps and spare traps. They're gonna die if you've ever been in his lair.
So he sets up this sort of impossible choice situation for Christine.
So there's like a coffin, and it contains 2 bugs that you turn. I mean, turn a bug and die?
Or turn the other bug and explode everything.
Yeah, one of them is to turn the bug, and then everyone dies.
She debates it, though. She literally looks at that one, reaches out towards it, goes, maybe it would just be better if everyone was exploded. But she decides against it and turns the one to marry him.
So she chooses there's a scorpion and a grasshopper, and she chooses the scorpion and turns that one around.
Honestly, I thought that was just such a strange detail. I'm like, okay, just say it out loud. But I guess it had to trigger the traps as to flood them.
Upon which the trapdoor is opened, and of course they're saved. And then they all escape. But then there's a mob that was led down.
They're coming with torches.
Kind of
having a Beauty and Beast. Kill the beast!
Kill the beast!
Kill the beast!
Kill the beast!
Moment. And he realizes that everyone's coming to kill him, and here Raoul and the secret police guy are. So he drags Christine away and uses the getaway carriage that
he's
Raoul
very vigorous
had
with
set
the
up
carriage
for Christine and him. And Christine is kind of groggy. She jumps out, though. Can't imagine how much that hurt. And realizing this, the Phantom stops the carriage, which tips over, and he tries to go over to try and bring her back, but then realizes, yeah, no, he would probably be better off just running. But he runs, gets to the end of a pier. Everyone meets him there with torches, and he's like, stay back! But of course, it doesn't work. They kind of beat him up and chuck him in the water. And it ends.
Yay.
Very abruptly.
I think he's meant to, when he's flourishing with his hands, I think he's meant to make them think that he has a rapier, like a sword. And then he goes, nope, got nothing in my hands. Sorry, guys. And then they throw him in the River Seine, which is in France.
I kind of thought he was going, I have dark magic or something. I don't know. I feel like the movie isn't very clear whether he is a spirit or just a normal man who's been trapped here, if he does have magic, or if he's just expressive, I guess.
I think it's all simple tricks and nonsense, like Han Solo says. It's misdirection. It's illusion. Theatrics. There you go. He's underneath a theater.
What do you expect?
A dramatic guy. He's a dramatic guy underneath a theater. How could he not be theatrical in everything that he does? I mean, the musical kind of makes you think maybe he has, abilities, maybe he doesn't, but it's all illusion and traps and trap doors and secret compartments.
And I'll challenge you listeners, because it's unclear, and of course you probably can't get from this plot Cliff Notes version anything about the movie really. So go watch the movie for yourself. We definitely always recommend it because we treat it as if you've already watched the movie, even though we recount it anyway. It's kind of our style. We comb through it kind of like a library and then grab the books as we skim through. We grab the important bits. But we challenge you, go watch this movie and try and come up with an idea or ideology for yourself, whether the Phantom is a spirit or a normal man.
The question is about the ending is, did it work or did it not work? Because the original ending was different, and I'm going to read out a reconstruction based upon some photos that they found and some individual frames of what they believe that the ending was. And I'm going to read that out to you guys. Leia, I don't think you know it. William, I don't think you know this ending either. I'm going to read it out to you. And this is what originally the theater-going audience, say what you will about theater-going audience, maybe they judge things as boring, maybe they judge things as not interesting or action-packed enough, and they beg for changes. And then the studio does it, and then we have what we have on film right now. So if you guys do not mind, I'm going to go ahead and elucidate what the original ending reconstructed was, and then you can give me your opinions on which one you like better. So some of the scenes that we already have, it went the same way. The Phantom is asking Christine which of the two switches she wants to pull, the scorpion or the grasshopper. In this version, she turns the scorpion, just like in the regular version. The water line in the sewer recedes, and the water starts to fill up the chamber with the gunpowder that's almost drowning Ledoux and Raoul. Okay, so far, so good, right? So the people from the city are coming down with torches to get the Phantom. Christine says, I will do anything you wish if you will only save them. Now, he asks her for a kiss because his mother would never kiss him and would only throw him the mask and run away. This is similar to the book. And she says she'll do as she wishes and gives him a kiss. He's surprised that she kissed him and did not die from it.
Because he's like, only a mother could love me. Only my mother could love me.
A face only a mother could love.
Right. And she says, please save them as you promised, right? He saves them just as he did in the current version. Raoul and Ledoux are pulled out of the water. Of course, the interesting thing in both versions that you see is how she responds to getting Raoul back. It really hits the Phantom square in the feels that Raoul and her really do have a thing. So the townspeople are coming in. The Phantom sees Christine Raoul and sees how they're responding to each other and know that they're truly in love, right? And he starts holding his chest as if he's dying. It's like he's dying from lack of love. The Phantom says, I release you from your promise. Go and marry your love. The Phantom sees the townsfolk with the torches coming from afar off, and he says, I'm going to die, but not by their hands. I love you so and love you still. So he's dying for the love of
Christine. And then the
Christine.
wedding ring falls.
Well,
I said this much earlier, if you guys remember.
Yeah, he says to Ledoux, remember that Eric, at the end of his wretched life, did one act of kindness in atonement for his crimes. So he sits down at the organ and says, my life is ended. I must play my requiem, which is like a funeral march, but it is your wedding march. The Phantom falls over dead as he is playing
Because he died of a broken heart. Yeah.
All he wanted to be was loved. And Raoul says, halt, the lot of you, do you not see? He's telling the townsfolk to just stop. Don't burn his... You're coming to kill him, but look, he's dying anyway. It's too late. The man known to the world as the Phantom is no more. Raoul tells the townsfolk to lay him in his bed, which is also a coffin. It's almost like the last good thing we can do for this man. And the end text says, to some he was a ghost, to others a devil, to one an angel, but forever will be remembered as the Phantom of the Opera. After this, there's an epilogue scene. It's really quick. Raoul and Christine are on a honeymoon in a place called Viroflay, and they have a kiss, and then it ends. So it's a more sad ending. It's emotion. I'll get y'all's opinion on it, but I think it's emotionally satisfying, but the other one is more action-packed and kind of, it appeals more to the visceral.
The person who wants it to be a monster movie versus the person who wants it to be a romantic movie.
Wants to be a romantic or
a
just
tragedy.
A tragedy. So I don't know which. I think I prefer the original version because there's a lot more acting that you get to do there, But again, I don't mean to put my 2 cents on your top of yours, but Leia, what do you think about the original ending and the new one?
If you know me, or if you've really listened to me in the past hour or so, you know that I love the tragedy. Don't know why. Always have. At first watch of the original beginning, I wasn't paying much attention, and when I looked back, he was chucked in the water. It ended just like that. And while on rewatch, I appreciated it more. I thought it was very heart-racing, and there was a lot of adrenaline and action in that, which there's nothing wrong with adrenaline and action, and I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity to really appreciate that, even though a lot of people either take the side of, oh, I only want to see the explosions and the punching, fight, haha. And then you have the other people who are like, oh, I prefer a more eloquent, tragic ending. And I do think that I would have paid a bit more attention had it been more emotional. But consider us in our day and age. We as humanity have shorter attention spans than ever, and I think it really depends on what sort of person you are. Back then, you had people who were more willing to pay attention to all the little details of an action scene. You have people nowadays who honestly could be either. It depends on what grabs your attention. Although I think most would say the most attention-grabbing thing is the acting and tragedy of a scene. Though, of course, opinions differ.
Yeah, William, what do you think?
My final thoughts for this movie was, compared to Calgary, it was kind of like that, but it was a bit more unsettling, but not really as great as Caligari. And it definitely falls behind Nosferatu when you think of, like the little tidbits inside it, depth, subtlety, art form, stuff like that. It falls behind, definitely. Nosferatu is better in that regard. And so the lesson learned for this movie is don't hang out with bad hobos, don't get into bad relationships, don't obsess with people like constantly,
and don't take your pity for love.
Yeah.
Know that just because you feel sympathetic for someone does not mean you owe them your love. Just because someone has suffered, or the fact that your love and attention help them, that does not mean it is on you to sacrifice your well-being or your other relationships especially.
And the theme of this movie is also like beauty versus ugliness, and the nature of love, and don't judge a book by its cover.
True.
Because after all, they might be bad, look bad outwardly, but might be good inwardly. I mean, anyone could be the Phantom. I mean, as I said earlier as a point, was that any person could be a phantom. They could be, like, not worthy of love, but you should give them love, which is the themes of this movie. Also, there's, like, some sacrifices in this movie. She was going to sacrifice, although it didn't really, like, go into anything, but, like, sacrifice, marrying to the Phantom for Ledo and the Persian guy. Well, in the book, he's the Persian famine as well.
Yes. And of bringing people out of the darkness.
And into the light.
Seeing people fall into the darkness and knowing how to bring them out. Sometimes it's not something you can do, but there are times you can catch someone going towards a dark place before they reach that dark place. And with the Phantom couldn't really be helped, at least not in the framework of the story. The Phantom could not be helped.
Because after all, it's the inner. It's not the outer, but the inner that when you see someone truly, that drives people away. It's not, oh, they must be terrible people to not want me. Nice guy syndrome.
Yes.
Okay. So we have discussed Phantom of the Opera upside down and sideways. We've plumbed the depths and the catacombs of this movie. Of course, this story gets told quite a few other times until the modern era. It's most remembered to this day because of the musical. But we remember it in this case today due to this, with the power of this film. So Leia has a poetry blog, and we will list that address just kind of so you can take a look at some of her stuff. We'll list that in the description for the podcast here. We'll also list it on our blog so that you can find it easily.
Just in case you're a action movie watcher or a horror monster movie watcher at heart, and also a poetic romantic at heart. It's a rare few, but maybe you're out there.
And with that, we need to bid you adieu, and till next time.
Have a good night. Or a day.
See ya!
Or afternoon. Bye.
Bye.
Don't forget to open your third eye and telepathically message us at cinefanpod@gmail.com. Set your chronoscope dial to the future setting and peruse cinematicfanpodcast.wordpress.com. Hunker over your ham radio as your keen ears listen for the ghostly voices tweeting on our Twitter @CinematicFanta1. Exchange all of your money into Republic credits and donate at our Patreon page at patreon.com/cinefanpodcast. Ending transmission now.